Hello Game fans, when it comes to spooky games, I don't particularly enjoy the first-person, circle-flashlight, jump-scare heavy titles, and thus have picked out some more interesting games in terms of variety across genres, having a surprising number of games with throwback visuals, beginning with Power Drill Massacre. Think the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but replace the tool and you'll get the idea. Developer Puppet Combo has been churning out these VHS-era survival horror games, all of which are great, so I have every reason to believe this will be as well. Here's another interesting looking survival horror title in Sorry We're Closed, one that switches between fixed camera angles and a first-person perspective, and is surprisingly colourful for a horror game.
Come here, boy! Oh, what has gotten into him? Teddy, come on now!
With the increased proliferation of Unreal Engine 5, we will begin to see even more photorealistic horror titles, so think Blair Witch 2.0 when it comes to games like Paranormal Tales. Creepily, it is about people who went missing due to some sort of paranormal activity, in which you are reliving the events leading up to their disappearances, through the perspective of body cams, phones, and even VHS cameras, having multiple stories to tell and looks very unsettling. Surprise! Here's a spooky horror-themed title, but it stars cute anthropomorphic animals, in which Begone Beast is a co-op horror title where you're battling demons and beasts, and have to use flashlights and the power of friendship in order to fight back. As such, it's not a stereotypical horror game and is more in line with games in the space that I look for, so if you like this, then you're in the right place. Moving on to another throwback horror game in ASYLUM, one that is, of course, set in a massive, decaying mental institute, a very common setting for horror games since the horror is twofold, both of mentally unstable patients, but more often than not, equally unstable medical practitioners that experiment on the patients and just touches an unnerving part of the human brain. Curiously, this appears to be more of an adventure game, as in you are walking around, collecting items, talking to people and soaking in the atmosphere, which is hella creepy, don't get me wrong, but might be a less intense one of these. There isn't a trailer for Butcher's Creek, but this is a first-person horror title in which you play as a hunter using a variety of rusty tools to brutalize a gang of serial torturers and looks violent, coming to us from David Semensky, who is best known for Dusk and Iron Lung, which makes this of interest. There are a handful of sci-fi horror games of interest as well, including Xenosis Alien Infection, in which you play as a deep space salvage hunter who chances upon the wreckage of a gigantic starship that was thought to be destroyed 50 years ago, with the spoils within possibly being worth a ton of credits, so you dock your ship and in you go. Of course, things are not as they seem, since the crew is missing, and you quickly encounter strange mutants and monsters that space style, having to carefully manage your resources as you explore and fight. It is supposed to be a handcrafted starship which is not procedurally generated, so maybe it might become as iconic as the Ishimura. The popularity of horror games surprises me sometimes, with the free Dark Deception from 2018 being of note, since it stars this horrible cymbal-banging monkey toy that looks like the stuff of nightmares, with Chapter 1 being free and subsequent ones being paid DLC, with the base game having an amazing 17,000 Steam reviews, which is why Super Dark Deception is of note, a 2D pixel art remake of that game that looks no less horrifying, with the demo releasing in 2022 and the full version should be out in 2024. This next title got my attention since, of course, The Lost World is a survival horror game with dinosaurs, another common antagonist in such games, but not all that common in the grand scheme of things, since dinosaurs are difficult to animate as compared to, say, some random humanoid phantom. Relive the horrors of Jurassic Park the movie as you attempt to survive on this island filled with the creatures, having to scavenge for resources and to use them at the right time, but I don't think you'll be getting guns anytime soon in this game, and it's more about running, hiding, and being clever in the use of your limited supplies, and is being published by Annapurna, so the quality should be there. Here's a long in development title that, as far as I know, is still in development in The Machine That Breathes, a pixel art survival horror game that takes inspiration from Resident Evil and System Shock. You play as an advanced AI mind which is trapped in a cyborg body which is physically located in an underground post-apocalyptic city, so you have to figure out what is going on and your role in the world. It might have a different art style, but this seems to be giving off Signalis vibes and will be of interest to fans of the genre. One of the fan-favourite indie games of 2023 is You Will Die Here Tonight, with a similarly promising title being Echoes of the Living, a 90s-inspired survival horror game that sure looks like Resident Evil. While the earlier mentioned title switches to first-person light gun shooting combat like House of the Dead, this game is an RE1-like through and through, down to the fixed camera angles and even the option for tank controls. There's a limited inventory, puzzles, key items to find, backtracking, and even a safe room, so colour me intrigued. Honestly, this game is more body horror than anything and is just so upsetting to look at, in which out of hands, if you really look at it, isn't all that gross, since the developer uses human hands and crudely animates them, but then it is assembled and placed together to resemble a face from the eyes, nose, and mouth, and simply gives me the heebie-jeebies. There are also card battles for some reason and a roguelite-ish structure, but this game for how gross it looks. A game which bills itself as a horror survival adventure is Dead Static Drive, one that doesn't look as creepy as some of these other titles, but has dubbed itself Grand Theft Cthulhu, sets in a world falling apart and where society has begun to collapse, in which you hop into your vehicle and just drive to escape. This has been a long time coming and is still in development, so maybe 2024 will be the year.
David! Damn. Nick and Sharon are dead. Shit! Shit! We have to restore the power now! Grab the car to Sector C!
Here's a developer that might be kicking themselves since they made the decision to delay the game from 2023 to 2024 for this asymmetric survival horror PvP title named Level 0. Then, of course, Lethal Company launched in October 2023 to massive success, and while not exactly the same kind of game, there is definitely an appetite for this. The scientist players have to work together to repair the electrical system so that they can escape, but are being pursued by creatures lurking in the dark, where the constant cat and mouse tension of not knowing where the monsters will come from is part of the appeal of the game.
David, I found the repair kit, but you need to hurry up!
Scientist players have various tools at their disposal and can use light to destroy the monsters, but the monsters can crawl through vents, see the scientists through walls, see in the dark, and more, with there being XP, unlocks, and cosmetics to keep you playing, and looks like it has potential, although player population will be a concern.
Attention, crystal overload. Backup power failure.
Oh shit! Ah!
It's a spooky first-person horror title set on an abandoned moon base titled Routine, which apparently was first shown off in 2012 on Steam Greenlight, if you remember that, which then re-emerged in 2022 under publisher Raw Fury. I remember this was around the time of excitement for horror games, since we had reviews of the Callisto Protocol, the the Dead Space remake and more, with this game looking impressive visually. However, the developer's last post on Twitter was in January 2023, so I have no idea what is going on with development, so fingers crossed we'll get some news soon. I've been keeping an eye on this throwback horror title since I followed the developer on Twitter, in which BECROWNED is a self-styled, surreal, survival horror game set in the world between reality and dreams. I'm not sure if it's all in the mind of the character, of him seeing things that may not really be there, so there is a psychological horror aspect to the game as well, or if it is based on some form of reality within the in-game universe, but either way, this looks pretty creepy. The Silent Hill vibes are there, and there's the classic aspects of bullets not being the most effective against enemies, along with key items to find and puzzles to solve, and I'm just getting started with these games that use throwback visuals.
How Audrey stood against the ink demon. How we all came to her rescue in the nick of time. But how did we escape the pit? How did we get away? Now there's a story.
At the risk of angering a large proportion of gamers, I don't really care for mascot horror titles, but I do have to acknowledge the impact that they have on the gaming landscape, in which Bendy and the Ink Machine is a great example of such a game, with their next title, Bendy the Cage, being in development, and is set during the events of Bendy and the Dark Revival and tells a parallel story. Ever so often, we have some really creepy looking adventure games that go way back to games like Alone in the Dark, in which Deep Sleep Labyrinth of the Forsaken looks and feels the parts of such a game. It is another pixel art title, and again uses dreams and nightmares as the reason for these fantastical locations. Lucid dreaming and sleep paralysis can be one of the most frightening things to have occur to you, with this game looking to explore some of those same feelings as our protagonist struggles in the search for her brother, which she thought had died. Interestingly, this comes to us from developer Script Welder, who is a Flash game legend, having made the Don't Escape and Deep Sleep games, and looks to continue their expertise in the space. Another intriguing looking horror title is Post Trauma, in which you play as a middle-aged train conductor, not the most flashy of heroes, trapped in a terrifying twisted reality. This means flashy things that are strewn all over the train station, in which our protagonist must make his way through, finding precious tools and items in order to progress forward. I don't believe combat is a focus here. After all, what can you do against these monsters? So it's more of the exploration and puzzle solving aspects, but the stinger at the end of this trailer does certainly show off something truly horrifying. Here's a relatively newly revealed title that is kind of meta and trippy as well, since darkwebSTREAMER takes place in an alternate history 90s internet in which you are an occult streamer. So yes, think Twitch but all spooky, but the supernatural is real in this world and might just F you up. It's one part RPG, so you need to manage skills, stats, subscribers, money and more, with randomized encounters that will change the story depending on your responses, with a very strange, creepypasta kind of setup and might just worm its way into your brain. Here's another spooky adventure game in Enigma of Fear, one that uses 2D pixel art sprites in 3D environments, in which our heroine is exploring somewhere known as the Perimeter, a place that does not exist, in search of her missing father. It's an old-school survival horror game like Resident Evil with some light combat elements, but you need to be smart about conserving ammo since it will be needed in critical situations. Personally, I think that it looks awesome, but that might just be the pixel art lover in me talking, and looks like a fantastic package overall. In a world where Unreal Engine 5 will no doubt see the trend of horror games go towards hyper-realism, I find myself gravitating towards the throwback PS1 era art style of early polygonal games and the unnaturalness that comes along with that, with a fantastic looking game being Samurai Unicorn. You will notice that this has more of an action slant, in which our protagonist is the unwilling host of a parasitic gauntlet, which, as far as I can tell, is the titular Samurai Unicorn as they explore the megacity of Sydney 3. You're uncovering secrets and hunting down bosses known as the Dream Eaters, and simply looks amazing. Indonesian developer Toge Productions has range since their games cover all sorts of genres, from the cozy coffee talk to the action strategy title Infectinator, with their next title being Whisper Mountain Outbreak, a co-op PvE multiplayer survival horror game that looks awesome. Again, this is a pixel art title and is set in 1998, in which an ancient curse has been unleashed after a malevolent being is awakened from a mountain. The co-op focus might make it less scary since it might lean more towards Left 4 Dead, but as in all horror games, you will probably become isolated from your friends and only have limited resources to deal with enemies, and I do wonder how the single versus multiplayer modes will be balanced. If you have been around horror games, one look at Broken Veil and you can probably guess its inspiration, being a grimdark side-scrolling horror puzzle platformer that is, of course, a little Nightmares-like. However, it is set in a post-Soviet provincial Russian town, so the influences on the monsters are different, and honestly, from the trailer alone, has some truly horrific designs that will haunt my nightmares. But you can enlist the help of cute cats in this game, so that's a plus, and does look like a fantastic title. I'm always partial to pixel art horror games, since you would think that the two don't mix, since the relatively unrealistic pixel art games of the 90s are more often used with JRPGs and Zelda-style action-adventure games, but has been shown to be effective in games like the Junji Ito-inspired World of Horror from 2023, which is why My Work Is Not Yet Done is of interest. This is one part survival game and one part investigation game, in which you play as the last surviving member of a doomed scientific expedition sent to track down the source of a strange transmission in this seemingly ever-changing landscape reclaimed by nature. Of course, something terrible has happened to the other members of your crew, and where there are haunted radio signals and themes and ideas that play with the vanishing of human identity as well as purpose, since it is, after all, titled My Work Is Not Yet Done, despite all the setbacks that our protagonist has faced, and is definitely one to watch. Of the Silent Hill likes, one of the game with the most amount of potential is Hollow Body, since it has an interesting tech noir setting, but even that will not save you from the horrors within. Our protagonist is an unlicensed black market shipper who goes after her partner who ventured into this abandoned British city 12 days ago in search of answers, having to locate her and to get the hell out of there. An event known as the Collapse has occurred in the past, which led to the creation of the Exclusion Zone, a 20-mile wide area in which this city is located in, and is, of course, the prime setting for such a game. It has atmosphere for days in the creepy, abandoned buildings that you need to explore, scavenging for key items, resources and clues to your partner's location, with some limited combat that looks very intense. It was successfully funded on Kickstarter in 2022, although the sum was not huge, with it then promising a December 2023 release window, so maybe 2024 will be the year. Now this title immediately got the attention the moment it was shown off, since Crow Country is a survival horror title that kind of looks like the original Final Fantasy VII in having those PS1 era visuals and blocky character designs. However, don't be fooled, this is a survival horror game through and through, in which one Edward Crow, owner of the theme park Crow Country, vanished 2 years ago, and our heroine has to enter the heart of the park in order to find him. Coming to us from SFB Games, who are best known for the adventure games Tango Tower and Detective Grimoire, so this is certainly a change of pace. One of the legendary indie game developers in the creepy space is Daniel Mullins, who makes meta horror games that are not explicitly jump scare type of games, but rather more resemble adventure games instead, with Pony Island 2 Panda Circus being the sequel to Pony Island from 2016, although there's no need to have played the first, since the developer even says that this game is not about ponies.
Wait a second.
It's just weird and interesting and looks very varied in terms of gameplay and ideas, so whatever it is, I'm definitely down for this. An amazing looking isometric survival horror title is Hostin, which is set in the 1990s in an isolated Polish town in which some sort of dark presence has begun to corrupt the town and the people within, possessing them and setting them loose on you, but does not warp them into zombies like in other horror games. Still, it looks amazing, and I like how the action switches to a third person behind the back camera that makes it seem much more actiony, and it's certainly one to watch. I went back to check on my old videos and realized that I covered this title back in 2021, where it was then slated for 2022, and yet Conscript is still not out, but the work continues and is into its 7th year, but the developer is active on Twitter and has posted in January 2024, so it's by no means a dead game. This is a World War I survival horror game that is set in the trenches of the Battle of Verdun, in which the combination of shell shock, PTSD and chemical weapons will make you question if the enemies you face are even real. It nails the throwback look, which, to be fair, was a lot more novel all those many years ago, but it still looks neat. For less creepy but equally awesome Zelda-style action-adventure games, watch this video to find out about 40 upcoming titles.